Welcome to this explainer. Today we're unpacking a concept that is absolutely foundational to criminal law and, frankly, critical to your personal rights. We're talking about the law of self-defense, or as it's known in the Pakistan Penal Code, the right of private defense. Over the next few minutes, we're going to break down sections 96 through 106 in a clear, authoritative, and plain-spoken way so you know exactly where the law stands.
So, put yourself in this scenario for a second. Imagine someone breaks into your house in the dead of night. Or maybe a stranger suddenly attacks you out on the street. In that split second, you don't have time to call the police and just wait. You have to act to survive. But the crucial question the law asks after the dust settles is simple, yet incredibly powerful. Were you legally within your rights to fight back? A lot of people assume self-defense means anything goes the moment you're threatened, but it doesn't. The law actually draws very firm, specific lines about exactly how far you can go.
Okay, let's look at our roadmap for today. We're going to cover the basics of private defense, the limits of your rights, defending the human body, defending your property, and finally, the innocent bystander rule.
Part 1. The basics of private defense.
It all starts right here with Section 96. This section lays down a fundamental rule. Nothing is an offense which is done in the exercise of the right of private defense. In plain terms, the law recognizes and actively protects your basic human instinct to survive. If your actions genuinely fall within the scope of this legal right, the law does not treat you as a criminal. So, even if you cause physical hurt to someone, which in literally any other context would be a crime, it's not an offense if you did it in legitimate self-defense. But as we're going to see, this right is a shield, not a blank check.
Section 97 outlines exactly what you're allowed to protect. On one side, obviously, you have your own body and your own property. But look at the other half of this. You aren't just allowed to protect yourself, you can legally step in to defend another person's body or property too. If you see a stranger being violently assaulted on the street or someone's shop being robbed, the law actually empowers you to act. You don't have to be the direct victim to invoke this right.
Now let's consider a slightly more complex scenario under Section 98. What if the person attacking you is of unsound mind? Or maybe they lack maturity, or they're heavily intoxicated? Legally speaking, that attacker might not be capable of committing an actual offense because of their mental state. But Section 98 makes it crystal clear. Your right to defend yourself remains fully intact. If an intoxicated or mentally unstable person poses a physical threat to you, you have the exact same right of private defense as you would against a fully capable adult.
Part 2. The limits of your rights. This brings us to Section 99, which acts as the crucial filter for everything we're discussing today. This section draws the strict boundaries of private defense. First, you generally cannot claim this right against a public servant, like a police officer, acting in good faith under the color of their office, unless their actions cause a reasonable fear of death or severe injury. Second, and this is highly important, self-defense is not valid if you simply had time to seek help from the authorities. If you can safely lock your door and call the police, the law says you must do that rather than taking matters into your own hands. And finally, the golden rule, proportionality. You cannot use excessive force. Your response simply cannot inflict more harm than is strictly necessary to stop the threat.
Part 3. Defending the human body. These next two sections are arguably the most critical in the entire chapter. Section 100 defines exactly when you are legally justified in using lethal force, meaning causing death. This is reserved strictly for the most severe, extreme threats. You can only go this far if an assault causes a reasonable apprehension, which means a justified, logical fear based on the circumstances of death or grievous hurt. Grievous hurt basically means severe, lasting physical injury. It also applies to assaults with the intention of rape, unnatural lust, kidnapping, or wrongful confinement. If the threat is that extreme, the ultimate response is legally permitted. But look at Section 101. This is the flip side. For any lesser assault that doesn't meet those extreme criteria, you are restricted strictly to proportionate, non-lethal harm.
Timing is absolutely everything in self-defense, and Section 102 dictates the precise timeline for defending your body. Your right to defend yourself commences the exact moment a reasonable apprehension of danger arises. You don't have to wait to actually be struck or injured before you defend yourself. However, that right vanishes the very second that danger has passed. If an attacker drops their weapon and runs away, the threat is over. If you strike them in the back as they flee, that is no longer private defense. At that point, it's retaliation, and legally, that is a crime.
Part 4. Defending your property. Now let's look at how the framework shifts when your property is under attack. Section 103 strictly limits when you can use lethal force to protect property. You cannot just use deadly force for any run-of-the-mill property crime. It is restricted to terrifying extreme scenarios: robbery, nighttime housebreaking, arson committed on a building used as a human dwelling, or any theft or trespass that is so aggressive it causes a reasonable fear of death or grievous hurt. The law recognizes that in these very specific property crimes, there is an inherent grave danger to human life as well, which justifies a lethal response.
Tying directly back to our anchor of proportionality, Section 104 handles the lesser offenses. If someone is committing a simple theft, mischief, or basic criminal trespass, let's say snatching an item off a patio table and running away without physically threatening you, your right extends only to non-lethal harm. You can absolutely use proportionate force to stop them or to recover your property, but you cannot legally use deadly force.
Just like we saw with bodily defense, Section 105 maps out a strict timeline for property. Your right to defend property is active only as long as the wrongful act is ongoing. If it's a theft, for instance, the right ends when the offender has successfully retreated with the property, or when you recover the item, or when public authorities arrive. The overarching principle here is very clear. Your legal right lasts exactly as long as the immediate threat or wrongful act is actively happening, and not a single moment longer.
Part 5. The Innocent Bystander Rule.
Section 106 addresses a genuinely difficult edge case in the law. What happens when a deadly assault forces you to make an impossible choice? Imagine you are facing a grave, deadly assault, a situation causing a real, reasonable fear of your own death. But to effectively defend yourself, maybe by firing a weapon back at your attacker, there is a substantial risk of harming an innocent bystander in the crossfire. The law is pragmatic. It doesn't expect you to calculate a perfectly risk-free response when your own life is imminently on the line. So Section 106 legally allows you to run the risk of harming that innocent person. But keep in mind, this only applies if you are facing that ultimate deadly tier of assault.
This entire framework we've just walked through isn't just academic theory. In real criminal cases and murder trials across Pakistan, this is exactly how a court will evaluate your actions. The judge won't just ask if you were attacked. They're going to ask, did you have time to call the police? Was the force you used proportionate? Did you continue attacking after the immediate threat ended? Did your specific situation legally justify lethal force under Section 100 or 103? Ultimately, they will use Sections 96 through 106 to determine if your split-second reaction was a justified act of survival or a criminal offense.
And that brings us to the core philosophy of this entire chapter of the Penal Code. The law fiercely protects your right to survive, but it demands proportionality. Private defense is designed as a shield of last resort, not a sword. If this breakdown helped clarify your legal boundaries, make sure to subscribe to Pakistan Legal Insight for more plain-language legal explainers just like this one. But I'll leave you with this final thought to consider. In the sheer chaos and terror of a split-second attack, how confidently could you draw the line between a legally justified act of survival and a criminal act of retaliation?